The world of the Shadowtail Pack was a world of gray. The sun never seemed to shine quite right through the thick, gloomy trees that surrounded their crumbling village. The houses were little more than patched-up shacks, and the people who lived in them wore clothes that had been mended more times than anyone could count. This was Luna's world, a world of constant worry and quiet hunger. She was a young woman with kind eyes that held a sadness too heavy for her age, and her days were spent trying to find enough food for her little brother and her ailing parents. Her father's cough was a constant, rattling sound that echoed through their small home, a grim reminder of their fragile existence. They were not just poor, they were defenseless. The Shadowtail Pack had no mighty warriors, no powerful alpha to protect them. They were at the mercy of the stronger, fiercer packs in the forest, and the most vicious of them all were the Blood Claws. It was on a day when the last of their winter stores had run out that the Blood Claws came. Their alpha, a brutish man named Gorvin, stormed into the village with his snarling followers. He demanded their monthly tribute, a payment of food and supplies that the Shadowtail Pack simply did not have. Luna stood in the doorway of her home, her arms wrapped around her trembling brother, as she watched Gorvin shout at their pack's elderly leader. "No food." Gorvin roared, his voice like grinding stones. "Then we take something else. We'll take your land. We'll take your homes. You can all freeze in the woods for all I care." The desperation in the air was a physical thing, a thick, suffocating fog of fear. Luna felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was the end. They would lose everything. That night, as her brother cried himself to sleep from hunger and her mother tried to soothe her father's worsening cough, Luna knew she could not just sit and watch her family fade away. She had to do something, anything to save them. She remembered the whispers, the dangerous stories traded in hushed tones around the dying embers of the community fire. Stories about Fenrir, the alpha of the mighty Night Fang Pack. He was called the Ruthless Alpha, a leader so fierce and cold that even his own warriors tread carefully in his presence. And the whisper was this: Fenrir was offering a fortune, a life-changing amount of gold and riches, to any woman who would agree to become his bride for a single night. Just one night. The stories said that the women who went were never seen again, but that was a lie. They were seen exactly once. The next morning when they were given their reward and sent away, silent, pale, and refusing to speak of what happened. It was a terrifying gamble, but for Luna, it was the only gamble left. The journey to the Night Fang territory took 2 days on foot. The forest changed as she walked. The gray, sickly trees of the Shadowtail lands gave way to tall, imposing pines and ancient oaks. The air grew colder, sharper. The territory was guarded, and she was stopped by 2 huge, unsmiling warriors who looked at her thin frame and worn clothes with clear suspicion. But when she whispered her business, their expressions shifted to something between pity and awe. They led her in silence to the heart of the pack, a fortress of dark stone that seemed to claw at the sky. It was nothing like her village. Here everything was clean, strong, and powerful. The people moved with purpose and strength, a stark contrast to the weary shuffling of her own pack. She felt small and terribly out of place. She was taken to a vast hall, the floor polished to a shine, the walls hung with tapestries depicting great battles and legendary wolves. And at the far end, seated on a throne carved from a single massive piece of obsidian, was Fenrir. He was even more intimidating than the stories suggested. He was not just tall. He was built of pure, solid muscle, with broad shoulders and a stance that screamed of absolute authority. His hair was dark as midnight, and his eyes were the pale, sharp gray of a winter storm. They held no warmth, no welcome, only a deep, calculating intensity. He watched her approach, not moving a muscle, and Luna felt her knees tremble. She had to force her feet to keep moving, one in front of the other, until she stood before him. "You are from the Shadowtail Pack," he stated. His voice was not a roar like Gorvin's. It was low, quiet, and yet it filled the entire hall, demanding obedience. It was a voice used to being instantly listened to. Luna could only nod, her throat too dry to form words. "You know the terms?" he asked. She found her voice a small, shaky thing. "One night. As your bride. And in the morning, the reward." Fenrir leaned forward slightly, his stormy eyes pinning her in place. "Others have come." They were trembling wrecks before the sun even set. They could not bear the ceremony. "Why do you think you can?" Luna thought of her father's cough, her brother's hungry tears, her mother's hopeless face. A new strength, born of pure desperation, straightened her spine. She looked directly into those frightening eyes. "My family will starve or be driven out without this money. My fear is not as important as their survival. I will bear it." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps or interest, passed through Fenrir's gaze. It was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual icy mask. He stood up and he seemed to tower over her. The ceremony is on the night of the full moon. It is not pleasant. There is a wild magic that must be satisfied. You will stay in the room with me until dawn. You will not leave. Do you understand? Luna nodded again, her heart hammering against her ribs. Fenrir gestured to a servant who seemed to appear from the shadows. Prepare her. She stays until the full moon. He then turned his back on her, a clear dismissal. The deal was struck. As Luna was led away to a room that was both luxurious and felt very much like a prison, she wondered what she had just agreed to. She had sold one night of her life to the most feared man in the forest. All she could do now was hope she would survive to see the morning and claim the reward that would save everyone she loved. The days leading up to the full moon were a strange and silent waiting game for Luna. She was given a beautiful room with a soft bed and warm blankets, a stark contrast to the thin pallet she slept on at home. Her meals were delivered on silver trays, more food than she had seen in a year, rich with meats and fresh bread. But the luxury felt like a cage. The servants who brought her food would not meet her eyes, their faces filled with a nervous pity that did nothing to calm her own fears. She was allowed to walk in a private walled garden, but she was always watched from a distance by the stern, silent guards of the Night Fong pack. She tried to ask one of the older servants what would happen on the full moon, but the woman just shook her head quickly, pressed a finger to her lips and hurried away. The silence and the suspense were worse than any direct threat. Luna's mind conjured up terrible images, stories of ancient sacrifices and monstrous rituals. She pictured Fenrir transforming into a mindless, slavering beast, and her role as a mere offering to his rage. The brave front she had shown in the great hall was crumbling, replaced by a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in her bones. Finally the day arrived. The air itself felt different, thick with a strange, wild energy that made the hair on Luna's arms stand up. The sun set, painting the sky in fiery colors that quickly deepened to a velvety, star-dusted black. The moon, a perfect, glowing white circle, rose over the fortress, and its light seemed to pulse with a power of its own. When the servants came for her, they did not bring her a fancy dress. Instead, they dressed her in a simple, comfortable shift made of soft, silvery fabric. They led her not back to the great hall, but down a winding stone staircase deep into the heart of the mountain upon which the fortress was built. The air grew cooler, and the only sound was the echo of their footsteps and the frantic beating of Luna's heart. They stopped before a massive, circular door made of dark, ancient iron, covered in swirling symbols that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. This was the place. The servants opened the door just enough for her to slip through, and then it was shut behind her with a heavy, final boom that echoed like a funeral drum. The room was vast and round, hewn from the living rock. In the center, the ceiling opened to the sky, allowing the full moon's brilliant light to pour in, illuminating the chamber in an eerie silver glow. And there, standing in the very center of that moonbeam, was Fenrir. But he was not the controlled, icy alpha from the great hall. He was bent over, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, his entire body trembling with a visible, immense strain. A low, pained growl rumbled from his chest, a sound that was not entirely human. He was still in his human form, but he was fighting something, a battle happening deep inside him. He turned his head as she entered, and his eyes were not the color of a winter storm anymore. They glowed with a feral, golden light. "Stay back," he gritted out, each word seeming to cost him a tremendous effort. Luna froze, pressed against the cold stone of the door, ready for the monster to emerge. But the monster did not leap at her. Instead, Fenrir let out a sharp, agonized cry and fell to his knees. The transformation began, but it was wrong. It was not a clean, powerful shift. It was a violent, wrenching struggle. His muscles spasmed, his bones seeming to crack and reform only to crack again. It was not a change he was commanding, it was a change that was tearing him apart. He was not becoming a beast out of anger. He was being consumed by a pain so profound it was a physical force in the room. Luna watched, her own fear momentarily forgotten, replaced by a shocking wave of understanding and pity. This was the secret. This was the curse. The ceremony was not about him taking a bride. It was about him needing an anchor, a witness to a private agony he had to endure every single month. The stories of his ruthlessness were a shield to hide this terrible vulnerability. Another wave of pain seized him, and a cry of pure torment escaped his lips. It was that sound, so raw and full of suffering, that broke the last of Luna's fear. She was not facing a monster. She was witnessing a man in unbearable pain. She remembered all the nights she had sat by her father's bedside, holding his hand through his fits of coughing, her mere presence offering a small comfort. This was no different. Slowly, carefully, she took a step away from the door. Then another. Fenrir snarled, a warning sound, but it was weak, diluted by his suffering. I said, "Stay back," he managed to gasp. Luna did not listen. She walked steadily towards him into the pool of moonlight, until she was just a few feet away. She could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the cords of muscle standing out on his neck from the strain. She did not touch him. She knew better than to lay a hand on a wounded animal. Instead, she slowly sank to her knees, sitting just outside of his reach. She began to talk. Her voice was soft and calm, a gentle stream in the tempest of his pain. She did not know what she was saying. She talked about her little brother, about the silly games he liked to play. She described the few happy memories she had of her family before the poverty became so crushing. She spoke of the smell of the pine trees after the rain in her own territory, and the way the fireflies looked on a summer evening. She just talked, pouring out a steady, quiet stream of words, offering a piece of her own simple world as a lifeline away from his torture. For hours she sat there. Fenrir continued to convulse and struggle, but the snarling lessened. His glowing eyes would flicker to her face, watching her, listening. He was still in immense pain, but the wild, frantic edge of it seemed to soften. He was focusing on her voice, using it as a point of stability in the storm raging within him. As the night wore on, the worst of the transformation seemed to pass. He remained on all fours, his body now a powerful, terrifying mix of man and wolf, but the violent spasms had ceased. He was breathing in heavy, ragged pants. Luna, growing bolder, slowly reached out her hand. Her fingers trembled, but her movement was steady. She gently placed her palm on his heaving shoulder. His fur was coarse and warm. At her touch, a great shudder ran through his entire body, and he let out a long, slow breath that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. The final tension seemed to drain from him. He did not move away. He allowed the contact, this small human comfort in the midst of his monstrous form. They stayed like that as the moon began its slow descent, the silvery light in the room softening to a pre-dawn gray. The beast had not been conquered by force, but soothed by an unexpected kindness. The long, terrifying night was finally quietly over. The first light of dawn crept into the stone chamber, painting the gray walls in soft shades of pink and gold. The full moon was gone, and with it, the wild, painful energy that had filled the room. Fenrir was fully human again, dressed and standing by the great circular door, his back to Luna. He looked like the Alpha from the great hall once more, tall, powerful, and composed. But the memory of the broken, suffering man from the night before was burned permanently into Luna's mind. She slowly pushed herself up from the floor, her body stiff and cold from the long hours of sitting still. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken things. She had seen his deepest secret, his most profound shame. She braced herself for his anger, for him to usher her out quickly now that her purpose was served. He turned and his stormy eyes found hers. There was no anger in them. Instead, there was a deep, unsettling intensity, a look of raw, bewildered calculation, as if he was seeing a complex puzzle he could not solve. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow him. They walked back through the silent fortress, the early morning sun streaming through the high windows. Servants bowed their heads as they passed, but their eyes were wide with surprise and curiosity. They had never seen their Alpha walk beside a woman after the ceremony. He led her not to the gates, but to a small, private dining room where a simple breakfast of warm bread, fruit, and tea was laid out. "Eat," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Then you will be given your reward as promised." Luna sat, her mind reeling. This small kindness, this moment of normalcy after the nightmare, felt more disorienting than any threat. They ate in silence. Luna could feel his gaze on her, studying her. Finally he spoke. "Last night," he began, his voice careful. "You were not afraid." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of profound fact. Luna looked down at her hands. "I was afraid at first," she admitted quietly. "But then I saw it was pain, not malice. I was not afraid of your pain." Fenrir was silent for a long moment. "Others have run. Others have screamed. They saw only the monster. You saw the man." He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. "Come." He led her to the great hall, the same one where they had first met. A heavy chest sat on the floor before his obsidian throne. He opened it, and inside, gleaming and sparkling, was more gold and jewels than Luna had ever dreamed existed. It was a king's ransom. It was more than enough to save her family, to rebuild her entire pack, to ensure they would never want for anything again. Her heart leaped with a fierce, joyful hope. It was over. She had survived. She had won. The bargain is fulfilled, Fenrir said, his voice echoing in the vast hall. Take it. It is yours. Luna took a step toward the chest, her hand outstretched. But then Fenrir spoke again and his words froze her in her tracks. But you will not be leaving with it. Luna spun around, her hope instantly replaced by a cold, sharp betrayal. What? But you promised? A deal for one night. The anger she had expected from him now flared in her own chest. Fenrir took a step toward her, his presence suddenly overwhelming the room. The bargain is changed, he declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. You will not be my bride for one night. You will stay. You will be my Luna. My queen. Forever. The words hung in the air, final and absolute. Luna stared at him, disbelief and fury warring within her. You can't do that, she whispered, her voice shaking. You can't just command me to stay. I am not one of your warriors to order around. She pointed a trembling finger at the chest of gold. I did my part. I endured the night. I want to go home. Fenrir's expression was hard, his jaw set. This is your home now. You have seen what I am. No one leaves with that knowledge. You belong to me. The word belong was like a spark on dry tinder. It ignited something fierce and proud inside Luna. She straightened her spine, her eyes flashing with a fire he had never seen in her before. I belong to no one, she said, her voice growing stronger, ringing through the hall. I came here to save my family, not to become a possession for a tyrant. You think because you are alpha you can own people? You think gold and commands can replace freedom? I will not be your prisoner, queen. I will not stay with a man who sees me as a thing he has bought. For a long, tense moment, they stood facing each other, the air crackling with the confrontation. Fenrir looked utterly stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever refused him. The command in his eyes faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion and then something else, a dawning, grudging respect. He had spent his life using fear and power to control everything around him. He had thought to control her the same way. But her defiance, her courage to look a ruthless alpha in the eye and tell him he was wrong, shattered that notion completely. The hard line of his shoulders softened. The cold mask of the alpha fell away, revealing the man who had been so soothed by her voice in the dark. He took a slow, deep breath. You are right, he said, the words sounding foreign and difficult for him. Luna blinked, sure she had misheard. What? I said you are right, Fenrir repeated, his voice quieter now, more human. I was wrong to command you. I have lived so long by command that I have forgotten how to ask. He looked at her, and for the first time, his gaze was not one of ownership, but of genuine, bewildered awe. I do not want you to stay as a possession, Luna. I want you to stay, for me. He took another step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Last night you saw me at my weakest, my most monstrous, and you did not run. You showed me a kindness I have not known since I was a child. You calmed a storm inside me that has raged for years. The thought of you leaving, the silence after hearing your voice, it is a different kind of pain. He gestured to the chest of gold. The reward is still yours. Your family will be saved, I swear it on my life. But I am asking you, Luna of the Shadowtail Pack, not as your alpha, but as a man who is humbled by you, will you stay? Will you be my partner, my true Luna, and rule by my side? The hall was utterly silent. Luna looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. She saw the lonely, powerful man who had been trapped by his own strength and his curse. She saw the vulnerability he showed no one else. And she remembered the connection that had sparked between them in the moonlight, a connection built not on power but on compassion. The anger drained from her, replaced by a slow, warm understanding. He was not offering a cage. He was offering a choice. He was offering his heart. A small, tentative smile touched her lips. She looked from the chest of gold, the symbol of her old life and her desperation, back to Fenrir, who represented a terrifying but hopeful new beginning. The gold can go to my family, she said softly. And I will stay. For you. The change in Fenrir was instantaneous. A true, genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face, broke through. It was a sight few had ever seen. He did not grab her or command her. Instead, he slowly, respectfully, offered her his hand. Luna placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, a promise of protection and partnership. In the weeks and months that followed, the Night Fang pack witnessed a transformation not in their Luna but in their Alpha. Fenrir became a wiser, fairer leader. You listen more. The cold ruthlessness was tempered by a new sense of justice and compassion, all inspired by the quiet, brave woman at his side. Luna was not just a bride, she was his advisor, his confidant, the calm center of his storm. She taught him that true strength was not in ruling through fear, but in leading with love. And Fenrir, the ruthless alpha who had bought a bride for one night, found not a temporary solution to his curse, but the love that would heal him forever. Their story became a legend, a tale of how kindness tamed the fiercest of hearts, and how a single choice, made in freedom, can change two lives and two packs for the better. If you enjoyed following the journey of Fenrir and Luna, and you want to discover more stories where love triumphs over darkness, be sure to subscribe for new adventures every week. You won't want to miss what we have planned next.